MIDI devices in CUBASE allow us to set up our MIDI devices so that we can control patch changes and allow for powerful editing functions. Before we get into the powerful editing possibilities, let's look at patch changes first. We're going to talk about how to install and set up MIDI devices, how to select patches, and how to create MIDI devices from scratch. Let's go to MIDI Devices Manager under Devices menu. On the left, we have the currently installed devices that we are using. So far, nothing is set up, so you won't see anything yet. We can install devices here, remove them, import and export setups so we can save them for later or transfer out settings to another computer. Once a device is selected, you can open it up here for editing, and you can import mixer maps here. Now let's install a MIDI device. Click the Install Device button. I happen to have a Korg Trinity, so I'm going to select it. If the MIDI device you have isn't listed here, that's where you can define a new device at the top. If your device is General MIDI or XG compatible, and all you need are the patch names, you can select either of these. Click OK. And now that we have our device, let's select what MIDI output we have our device hooked up to. Now press the Open Device button. Then select Patch Banks here. This is a list of all the sound patches in your MIDI device. In my case, the Korg Trinity. The Trinity has two modes for selecting sounds, the combination mode and the program mode. Other devices could have names like patches, performance, drums, etc. Now select bank assignments here. You can determine that when you pick your MIDI device and your MIDI track output, that it will automatically pick combinations or programs. Generally, you want to use programs as this is the most common way of sequencing with a MIDI device. Now let's exit all this and see what we've created. Add a MIDI track and select the MIDI device you've created under the MIDI output. Select the MIDI channel you want as usual, and then click on the patch name selection. Now you can see all the programs that are in your device, and you can select them. Don't forget that you can use the filter button and search for patch names here. Sometimes the patch names aren't correct because you've changed them or a software update to your device renamed some of your patches. Let's go back to the MIDI Device Manager and press Open Device. Go to Patch Banks and press the Enable Edit button. Let's make a few changes. Turn off Enable Edit, and let's see those changes. There they are. Now let's add a new MIDI device from scratch. You may need to do this in case you don't see your MIDI device in the list. Click Define New, and then OK. For the channel section, think about your MIDI device. If you consider every MIDI channel equal and the same, then pick all the channels you want to use from the identical channels list. What I mean, if your MIDI device sees all patches or programs as equal, then select identical, like on the Access Virus Sense. If your MIDI device, for example, sees channel 10 as exclusive for drums, or you want to stick to that standard, then choose 10 for individual channels. Another thing is if you're creating device panels described in the next video and want the panel accessible to all MIDI channels, then select identical. You can decide here what MIDI messages the identical channels will support and the preset type. Preset references are program change and bank select, and snapshots contain patch names and additional parameter settings which are reset when the preset is recalled. Activate sysx parameters if you wish to use sysx information with your device. Click on Snapshots if your device supports this, which memorizes all the parameters in a device. Now all of this can seem very overwhelming. If you want to get started really quickly, then select all the channels here, choose Preset References, and type in a name for the MIDI device. Then hit OK. Select Patch Banks and press the Enable Edit button. The first bank is already created for us. Let's rename it to Programs. Banks are the highest level of the Patch Banks list. Then we can create folders under our programs by selecting New Folder. Organize your patch banks the way your synth is set up, or in a way that makes sense to you when you pick patch names from the inspector. In the case of the Trinity synth, there were 8 folders with 32 programs in each folder. Folders make things easier to use instead of a huge list of patches. But you may like the huge list. You decide. I'm going to make 2 folders, Bank A and Bank B. This is very typical. Generally, you'll want to add multiple presets at a time. Choose a folder and select Add Multiple Presets. I'm going to have 128 presets in Bank A and 128 in Bank B. With patch changes, you need 2 things. The program change, like number 47, and the bank change number, which is the control change number. This is used for going between different banks, like Bank A, Bank C, Bank D, etc. 0 to 127 means it'll have 128 presets, so just leave this. Now this is the hard part. You'll have to do a little bit of work here. Consult the user manual of your MIDI device and find out what control change is used to select between the different sound banks. If you have expansion cards, find out what control changes are for them too. Write these down on a piece of paper so you'll have them accessible all the time. Then you need to find out one more thing, and that's the bank select change your device requires, whether it be LSB or MSB or swapped. I know this is tough, but you need to find this in your manual. It's the only way. You could experiment with different settings and you'll probably eventually find it, but it takes way too long to do that. In my case, Bank A uses Control Change 1, and Bank B uses Control Change 2. I'll enter 1 here. I can select a default name for my 128 patches, but usually preset is fine. Then click OK. There we have 128 presets in Bank A. Now let's do Bank B. You can now rename our patches, erase some of them with a delete key on your keyboard, and add new single patches by selecting new presets here. Let's get out of this and assign our MIDI output for the device. Then close the MIDI device manager. Choose your new MIDI device and then select your presets. If I added a new expansion card to the Trinity, I could open the device, add a new folder, figure out the control change for the expansion card, and then add my presets. Rename them, close all this, and then select the sound on my expansion card. That should help you get your head around program changes in MIDI devices.